African Nuclear Business Platform. The discussion here has been quite vibrant in the morning. We've had 2 presentations thus far, looking into the aspect of nuclear energy and how Kenya fits into the global map. And on stage, I have a couple of panelists who will be joining me for a discussion. On my immediate left, I have Professor Abdul Razak Shaukat, who is the Director for Africa at the International Atomic Agency. Welcome to the platform.
Thank you.
I have Engineer Collins Juma, who is the Chief Executive for the Nuclear Power Energy Agency and President of the Institute of Engineers in Kenya. On the extreme end there, I have Sanswere Abel Gaupalel, who for this show will be referring to him as GPO. And he holds the President of the Africa Young Nuclear Generation. And on the extreme end, I have Professor Kumno Chung, Professor at the Korea Institute of Advanced Nuclear Energy. Welcome, gentlemen. Just to give a little bit of backdrop, in April 2010, the National Economic Social Council gave the green light and indicated that it was important that nuclear energy is added into the Kenyan energy mix. And in November 2012, through Legal Notice 131, what happened was that the Nuclear Energy Electricity Board, I should say, was then set up in the Kenyan landscape. And that's how we're getting to this point where we are having a conversation around the steps which have been made. And if I could start with you, Engineer Collins, what are the issues that you have mentioned in your opening remarks at this forum has been the aspect of safety and security. And oftentimes, whenever we talk about nuclear energy, that's the first point that the public meets us with in terms of the situation across the globe, where we are seeing some of the major economies, if we could say, are actually rolling back from nuclear energy. Why is it important that Kenya gets into this particular space at this time?
Thank you. Maybe to start, on the contrary, there's an increase in the construction of the nuclear power plant after the Fukushima Daiichi accident. But I think, as I said earlier, we had a bad experience in this country in 1996, 1998. I hope you are alive by that. And I said also that we were over-dependent on hydro generation. I also said that the hydrology was bad that time. And if you can remember, we used to have an advert in the papers that these regions will have electricity on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, if you can remember. And I think the government had to sit back and check how we can have a long-term solution about this energy crisis. We didn't have coal that time. But I think even the coal we have now, I'm not sure whether we can use it for electricity generation. And you know the capping during the Paris conference. So we are left with limited sources where we can have baseload generation and also clean energy. We are talking about here the climate change mitigation. And that leaves nuclear and probably gas generation. And this is what the government decided, that nuclear takes a long time to develop. So if we want to have it in the year 2030, then we better start now in the year 2010. You talk about safety and security. All the reactors in the world, there are not many vendors, they could be 5, 6, 7. But each of those reactors is designed to work. But nuclear follows, in terms of safety, it follows what I always call the Poisson distribution curve. The likelihood of an accident is very rare. But should it happen, the impact is so big.
Sure.
And that's why safety is given a priority in the nuclear power plant generation. On the other hand, nuclear is not something that you wake up like maybe a thermal power plant and you send out the bids, you evaluate the bids and put up the power plant. Nuclear follows a pattern that, as Professor Shaukat said, you have guidelines from the International Atomic Energy Agency, that these are the infrastructure issues that we expect the country to address.
Yeah.
And if you are not able to address them, then it's very unlikely that you'll develop your nuclear power program.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Professor Shaukat, just to bring you in at this point, in your remarks you mentioned 3 key issues: public acceptance, resources, and technology. When you look at the landscape from this consideration, if I could call it that triangle, how do you feel the country's level of preparedness is in terms of nuclear energy?
Thank you very much. As I said earlier, when a country has decided to embark on nuclear power, the International Atomic Energy Agency works with the country so that we can be able to assist them to realize their dream. There are phases, as I said earlier, 3 phases that needs to be followed with several. We have 19 actually infrastructural issues, what we call soft of hard issues such as siting and soft issues, legal, regulatory infrastructure. So we put a lot of emphasis on the issues of safety and security and safeguards, peaceful uses of this technology. Now, yes, indeed, I say that when you want to embark on nuclear power, public acceptance is very important, because you do not want to go to a site and then you're not well received. So it's very important that there is advocacy at all levels, the parliamentarians, the leadership in the country, but most importantly, what in Kenya we call the Wanjikus, so to speak. It's very important that that is being done, because that's the only way then you get that acceptance into using this technology, because there's a lot of fear outside there. Yes. The other area is regulatory infrastructure. I mean, with a vibrant, independent regulatory infrastructure that oversees the areas of safety and security, it builds the confidence in the public that whatever is being done is going to be for the peaceful users, number one. Number two, is going to be useful, and most importantly, is going to be safe and secure as well. From where we are sitting at the International Atomic Energy Agency, Kenya has been able to follow these set laid out standards. They have completed an inner mission, what we call a review mission, and we are aware that they are on phase 1, moving to phase 2, and we continue on that journey, working with Kenya to ensure that this technology is going to be put into use in a safe and secure manner. As I said, also it's a long-term commitment. Yeah. You are talking of a 100-year commitment, and that takes at least 15 years to construct, and be able to commission a nuclear plant. So it's very important that is thought through. It's very important that we secure the relevant, the adequate resources that are required for this. It is very important that technology is used in a safe and secure manner.
Yes, and just before I let you go, I mean, you've mentioned some of the milestones which have been covered by Kenya. And if you look at Kenya's energy policy for 2018, one of the key indicators under the nuclear phase is that the first plant should be commissioned by 2027. Do you feel that's a feasible target for us?
We normally follow these indicators, as I've said, and when Kenya is ready, they make a request to the International Atomic Energy Agency, and we come and review. Kenya does self-assessment, so when Kenya feels that they're ready, they will write to the agency, and the agency will be able to send the expert to evaluate. I think we can only be able to say whether Kenya will be ready by then at each and every point that we assess. So it's really on Kenya to see how fast they want to move on this. But for us, really, whenever we are called upon, we come and we work with the stakeholders in the country and be able to evaluate using the standards that I've talked about, the 19 infrastructural issues, to gauge and see where Kenya stands.
I see. And GPO, to come to you in terms of the capacity building, which of course has been mentioned quite a bit by the opening remarks. What should be done in terms of scaling up the capacity to be sure that the country is prepared for nuclear energy?
Thank you very much. I think one of the issues that we've also seen, including the trends in the developed countries where nuclear power is that there's a lot of issues between the gap between the evening generation and the morning generation. That's how we would like to refer. And there's not a proper succession plan that we've seen. That's why if you look from the IAEA point of view, they've even developed a nuclear management sort of guidelines to say knowledge management. How do we bridge this gap? So I think for Africa to do it correctly, there must be an initiative of starting the young people being into the program as early as possible, so that the program when they are developed and implemented, young people can take over with ease. So we've seen that there's a lot of that gap that is not being corrected. But if Africa wants to correct it, a lot of young people must be interested to join the nuclear space as early as possible. And if you do that correctly, Africa will have a much easier way of ensuring that the nuclear program across the whole continent is sort of implemented in the correct and also the possible. I mean, I'll give you a typical example where we were convention last week in South Africa to have the second African Nuclear Youth Summit. And one of the key elements is that how do we bridge this gap between the older and the young generation in order to ensure that the success of the nuclear program in the continent is done in the correct manner. And by the way, one of the things of making sure that public accept the program is when they see young people into the program from as early as possible. I can guarantee you, every parent, when they see their child benefiting from a program from as early as possible, through scholarship, through fellowship and all those other things, there will not be any sort of dissatisfaction with the program. A lot of them will support it, and we have seen it happening. We have seen it now also in countries who are starting to develop, including Kenya. A lot of people are starting to support that because you are starting it from the as early as possible. If it's done in that manner, it is going to be implemented correctly.
I see. And Mr. Kumno, you put on many hats coming into this platform. I mean, I understand you played a role in the Kenyan Economic and Social Council. When you look at the steps that Kenya has made and some of the steps that we have to make going forward, what's your overall assessment in terms of progression towards harnessing the nuclear potential?
Well, thank you. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to say greetings to my Kenyan friend, because I met President Uhuru Kenyatta in Washington and discussed about Vision 2030 that time, because at that time he was finance minister under President Kibaki.
Sure.
And we discussed our Korean development and how to make Kenya really an industrialized nation. So it was a very interesting meeting. Then I got invitation to become a Kenyan because I was invited to be a member of National Economic Social Council. That's how we have this many friends. We discussed many issues, but the issue is this, as pointed out earlier, it's a political will. If we'll have action-oriented program. Action-oriented program will change the nation. And remember, in 50s, Korea was the poorest country in the world after Korean War. And we had an American friend visiting us, our president. He was Walker Sisler. I guess some of you may remember. He was the pioneer of nuclear power. And he came to see our 80 years old president. President, don't worry about lack of natural resources. You do have brain resources. And you have now nuclear power which can be produced by brains, not natural endowment. So if you work hard, you can make a great nation out of this poor nation. And that's why 60 years ago, just this year, 60 years ago, we formed the Ministry of Atomic Energy. We formed the Research Institute, and we had the groundbreaking of research reactor. So now, today, Korea has become a donor nation from a recipient nation. So once we have will and we have actions, history. So I'm so happy to be here, celebrating 60 years of our nuclear development in the nation of Kenya, our friends, and the nation which has the vision for the future. So I like to share some of my experience with other experts later on today.
Okay. And coming back to Engineer Collins here, one of the issues we often are met with when we talk about energy projects, whether it is geothermal, hydro, is the high upfront cost that is normally associated with the projects being undertaken. If you could just paint for us a picture of how this would look like in terms of nuclear energy when it comes from the cost perspective.
I think sometimes we also become very unfair in our calculations, especially when we compare maybe 100 megawatt plant that has a lifetime for 25 years, and then we want to compare it to a 1,000 megawatt plant which has a lifetime of 60 years and can be refurbished to 80 years. Sometimes the calculations don't go very well because it's like you are not comparing oranges and oranges. Yeah. But if you go to the records for the World Nuclear Association, I think the records are there where nuclear is in terms of cost. If it's not among the first three, then it could be among the first two. Yeah. I think that's the only thing I can say now.
I see. And Shaukat, any additional point on the same? The issue of cost when it comes to nuclear exploration, in terms of comparison, some would be keen to know just how does it fare when it's compared to other sources of energy?
I think, as Colin said, is all about why are you investing in nuclear power. It's a long-term investment, it's a very expensive venture, but at the same time, if you already have a plan to be able to use that energy for industrialization, for example, desalination and so on and so forth, then of course it pays. Yeah. It's a big investment, yes, but by the end of the day, it really pays, and you have to do your calculations right. It's not just to embark on nuclear power without knowing why you want to do nuclear power. And I'm sure most of the countries that are embarking on nuclear power, after the political pronunciation, political leadership, after building the infrastructure, they know, or they knew rather, from the beginning why they want to have this huge investment. It pays back definitely from what you're going to get out of this electricity that is going to be generated.
Okay. And you come from a country which, by that I mean South Africa, which definitely has already made some steps as far as nuclear energy is concerned. What are some of the key pointers you would point out for a country like Kenya, which is really still in the formative stages of this journey?
I think one of the issues that we need to do is how to package the message. One of the key elements that we find a lot of resistance is that we don't package the message quite correctly as the nuclear industry. For a typical example, the Kuwait nuclear power station in South Africa is one of the cheapest in terms of production of electricity. It's now what we call a cash cow for the utility because it's paid, it's now making money for the utility. But that message did not come correctly to the public. So if that message was corrected, we would have seen a lot of people support it because one, it's contributing to your tax revenue, two, employment, three, high level of education because you need highly trained individual there. And then the other aspect of it is to say that the communities, all communities around nuclear power plant, they tend to have a high level of the living standard. I mean, you go to Quebec, I remember in 2015, there was a court case between the developers in Cape Town with the national nuclear regulator because they wanted to develop within the exclusion zone, and the regulator said you can't, but because the regulations were not fully there. So that was one issue. So I think even developers themselves, they see nuclear as a lucrative place where they can have developments because people there are highly paid. I mean, you've got people who are highly paid as compared to other industries. I think for Kenya also is to say, how do we package this message so that an ordinary Kenyan can understand that nuclear is beyond power production? Because a lot of time we look at nuclear as power production, but when you look at it, it's beyond power production. It is contributing to the level of education. You need highly skilled engineers, technicians, and so forth. It also contributes to your fiscals. I mean, government can have money to do other things. It also contributes. So there's a huge socio-economic benefits that we're not talking about. And once we can explore that, engage the public, and show the public all the socio-economic benefit, you would see that nuclear will be more acceptable. I will give you one last example. In South Africa, we have spent, I think now it's going to around 260 billion on IPPs. But if you look at the socio-economic impact of that, It's very minimal. I mean, I can tell you, no, we've got zero local manufacturing. All those wind turbines are imported. So how do I invest on something that does not beneficiate me as a country? So these are the message that we need to start profiling, put forward. I'm not against renewable. That one is clear. But what I'm saying is that what is the socio-economic impact of these energy sources to an ordinary citizen?
Okay, and definitely whenever we talk about the wider socio-economic impact in Kenya, if I could just stay with you for a while, is always the question of job creation. If you could just give us a scenario of how this was translating in South Africa, for example, in the immediate community.
I'll tell you now, we operate 1,800 megawatt, 20 of nuclear power plant. We've got 20 megawatt of research reactor. Today, we've got close to 5,000 direct jobs. I'm not talking about indirect. Direct jobs that are contributing to the economy. Yeah. Because each and every individual, they pay tax. So that's 5,000 from a small program. Indirect jobs, we can't even go there. And also they are induced jobs. 2 years ago, Quebec did a socio-economic study with KPMG. If you look at the numbers there, the numbers are saying it. To say that nuclear, just 1,800 megawatt of nuclear contributes. If you have 10 of them, you can imagine. I mean, you go to all the developed countries, including South Korea, which was most fortunate to visit more than once. Yeah. The economy there, I mean, a lot of people are benefiting, especially young people. So Africa with a lot of young people can beneficiate from this program, and we've seen it, we've done the numbers, we know how we can benefit Africa, especially young people in the continent. So we need to make the right investment, we need to plead with our government to say, let's invest in a technology that tomorrow it will beneficiate the ordinary citizen of this country.
I see. Thank you. And Professor Kumno, on the same subject of the wider context of nuclear energy, it's just not energy, it's beyond it. What are some of the nuggets you would point out for Kenyans to look out for when it comes to this wider ecosystem impact?
Well, some of you, but this morning I got good news from Mr. Juma. Many of you know that Kenya is going for the Vision 2030. And as we discussed, the key is human resources. In the south of Nairobi, at Konja City, we are building Advanced Institute of Science Technology, which is Kenyan Advanced Institute of Science Technology. And we are working on it. And Mr. Juma told me they changed the name of mechanical engineering into mechanical and nuclear engineering. So Kenya is moving and in preparing human resources. And I like to take this chance, if you allow me. Nuclear energy is really international energy, as IAEA is set up. Also, we are working together. At this point, right now, in UAE, United Arab Emirates, international team is building 4 third-generation nuclear power reactors. Remember, UAE is an OPEC nation exporting oil. But they looked at a long-term view about the energy, and they started to build the Korean-designed APR 1400 on time, within budget, and by the international team working together. So if I may say to emphasize, let's work together beyond the national boundary, beyond the racial differences, and just brain resources, open-hearted, and with love and friendship, we can really explore the future of our world with science technology. That's I like to emphasize. Maybe I answered in the wrong way, but I want to emphasize this at this forum. That is why I came here, and I like to thank those people who helped us, but I like to work for those people who need our service together, not Korea alone, but together with the US, France, China, Japan, together, Russia, together, we should work for the benefit of the entire mankind.
Okay. And Professor Shaukat, how does nuclear energy, many of our viewers perhaps would be asking this question in terms of how does nuclear energy fit within the wider conversation of renewable sources? Because oftentimes in Kenya, that's what is cited as a key strength of the country's energy mix.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I mean, when you're looking at, there's a lot of concern now with the global warming and the climate change. So you need to minimize the carbon dioxide outside there. And nuclear technology, nuclear energy is one of those energy that you can embark on. My slides that I showed earlier, it shows you that it takes position number 4, coal being the top one of the list. And as I said in my presentation, quite a number of countries have already started they're rather continuing embarking on nuclear energy. So this is one of the energy sources that could be used among many other sources in the energy mix. But now that I have this opportunity, I also need to add that whenever we are talking about nuclear science, I think it's also important if you look at the broader aspect of nuclear technology. This is a technology that can also be used in other sectors. I spoke about health, for example. When you're using diagnosis and treatment of cancer, you're using nuclear science and technology. The institute that Professor Chong is talking about, it could be expanded to look at these issues. You're looking at non-destructive testing in industrialization. You're using nuclear technology. Food and agriculture, you're using nuclear technology. So there is, beyond just the energy component of this, I think it's important that the audience to hear this, that they should not be scared of nuclear science. Nuclear technology is there really for socio-economic development.
Yes. And Engineer Collins, I'm sure sitting at the agency, you certainly have something to add in terms of nuclear going beyond this aspect of energy.
Say that again?
I'm sure sitting at the agency, definitely the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency, the whole subject of nuclear going beyond energy and having a number of impacts in various sectors, how is the agency, if I could say, packaging this message to put to the public, and how is the appreciation of the same?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what my brother said from South Africa. Nuclear is beyond power. Nuclear, when you open the doors for nuclear, Professor Chung will tell you, you start things like shipbuilding, you start auto manufacturing, you have research reactors, you have technical service institutions, you have a variety of socio-economic benefits. Like, if I pick maybe the United States, you find that some states where the nuclear power plant is located, then they have a cheaper tariff within that state. Then they have job priority. You heard of indirect employment of 5,000. He said that indirect, you can't even talk about it. And this is what we are talking of beyond electricity generation.
Yeah. Okay. And GPO coming to you, he's just mentioned cheaper tariffs in select areas. I'd like us to delve into the subject of how this is likely to impact cost, because definitely for households as well as businesses, that's a key area of concern. How will this translate into my cost of energy at that point? What is the South African experience around this, and what can you share with us?
I would like to tell you something. 2 weeks ago, the Minister of Public Enterprise and the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, they had engaged the IPPs. Because when you look at, in the South African context, the cost of production of electricity from IPPs is more than the cost of production from the utility itself. I mean, does not make business sense from that particular point. And when you look at the cost of production from all the energy sources, nuclear is the cheapest. So when you look at it, in the long run, we need to put this thing into the conversation. Because one of the things that they do, they will say, the energy modelers, they will say, the least cost. But when you look at the least cost, you ask yourself, do they put all the costs into that, including the grid connection? Because that is one element that we have noticed. They don't put it. And when the cost comes to the customer, it's much more higher. So if we don't look at this thing holistically, we're going to have a problem. And also the lifespan of these energy sources must be into the conversation. You know, I was asking one of the anti-nuke colleague, I said, how much concrete are you using for one wind turbine? So after every 25 years, are you going to dig that out, or are you going to sort of build another one next to it? What does that cost do to the environment? Not only to the tariffs. So the conversation must start to change. And I think from the nuclear perspective, we are not conversing on the right platform. We always take nuclear is cheap, but we don't say how cheap is nuclear. It must be cheap from an environmental perspective until to the end user, which is the customer, in terms of the tariffs. So those are the kind of conversation now that we are starting to see happening from the discussion when you look at the energy planning. So from my sort of understanding, looking at the South African example, is that these things were not spoken well about. That is why now you see that the cost, the tariffs are getting higher because we did not include the total cost of every energy source. So that is what we need to start talking about more.
I see. Engineer Collins, I saw you shaking your head. I don't know if you have something to add to the cost discussion.
It says something interesting about renewables. And sometime when we have this discussion, we all support renewables. We all know what the wind energy and the solar energy can do. But it depends on the background you are talking about. Are you talking on the background of industrialization? Or you are talking on the background of watching TV and lighting your house? If that's what you want to do, then your objective is achieved. Yeah. But if you are talking of picking up, having maybe a steel smelting plant in Meru, I'm sorry, solar might not be able to do that. Yeah. And it's good I'm seeing my Ghanaian colleague in the room. And once upon a time he told me that the day he'll find a country that got industrialized on wind and solar, he'll leave and follow them. Maybe he'll say that when he's giving his remarks. I can see him shaking his head in the room. But that's the point. Yes. We all love renewables, but we know the limitations. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Kumno, let me talk to you about legislative support when it comes to passing the required laws before I come to the rest of the same. What was your experience coming through South Korea with this kind of nuclear energy? Because many times the hurdle that would be faced in other countries would be on the legislative front. Just share with us your experience.
Well, you know, when we started, we opened and accepted any help from any country. So, for example, we built Canadian heavy water reactors. We built French pressurized water reactors. We built American pressurized water reactors. Then we said, look, this is not a job of 1 or 2 years or 5 or 10 years. We have to think about lifetime cost, lifetime commitment. So we decided technological self-reliance and put our brain resources in improving technology, improving economics, and improving environment. Entire thing we have to know. You remember last week, Kenyan Mr. Kipchoge, who was the runner, he broke 2-hour barrier, right? And we celebrated internationally. Human beings, we can overcome almost impossible barrier. And he did it, but not alone, with the encouragement of the Kenyans and all other nations. So my suggestion at this point is that, because this is our first African business conference, right, on nuclear energy, but there will be more to come. And when we discuss we not only discussing one project at one time, we should think about many projects all over the world, and not next 10 years, but next 100 years. Our view should be very long term, and we should have consideration. Now, if I allow me to say something about cost, we should never consider just one construction cost alone. It's a lifetime cost, including waste management, everything, and including education and positive return. It's not just electricity, but also many other things come, as you pointed out. So, in my opinion, we should have a broader look, four-dimensional look, and as we discuss here, we should work together for the very exciting and interesting future for supply, safety, safeguard, security, all those areas of nuclear power.
Okay. Professor Shaukat, on the subject of legislative preparedness, what are some of the key things that a country like Kenya should be looking at in terms of the legislative framework that is required to ensure it's ready for this?
Thank you very much. I think this is what we call the soft infrastructural issues. Legal and regulatory framework are very, very, very important, because as I said earlier, when you're looking at the nuclear energy, nuclear power, nuclear science, safety, security, and safeguards are very, very important. And we must be able to set in place vibrant, independent regulatory body. So what the agency does is we have several programs that we help member states like Kenya to train. We have Nuclear Law Institute. Every year we take participants from various parts of the globe, from the member states of the IEA. We also have expertise. We have expert missions that are able to come. We have indicators that we can be able to see you're moving from one point to another, for us to say that you really have met the legal and regulatory framework infrastructure. So we put a lot of emphasis. In fact, if you cannot be able to meet the requirements of the legal regulatory infrastructure, you better as well not go and venture into this, because the safety and security safeguards is all about the legal and regulatory. So it's very important that this is followed to the latter. We also encourage, experts from other parts of the world also to work very closely with countries like Kenya, so that they can offer training. And I know South Korea is one of those where Kenyans do go for training, and there are other places that they can be able to do this. There is no harm also for Kenya to set up institutions that will be able to offer this training as well. Yeah. Because as Professor Chong said, is a long time, a life commitment. We are talking of 100 years. Yeah. So you really have to set it up so that there is that sustainability of the program that you start.
Okay. And Engineer Collins, now on the same subject of the legislative framework, what's your assessment of the Kenyan landscape in terms of our readiness now that you sit at the agency?
Yeah, as I said during my opening remarks, is that the most important thing at this stage is to get a regulator in place. And the bill is before the National Assembly. Hopefully, I said within few months, I'm thinking of 2 months, we should be able to clear with that bill, and then we have a regulator. Without a regulator, as Professor said, you really can't move, because if you want to do site characterization, the regulator has to come in place. If you want to do technology assessment, the regulator has to come in place. So I can see the future is bright within the next 2 months.
Okay. Okay. And JP, coming to you, in terms of nuclear energy, from our studies, clearly is touted as, in terms of the conversion efficiency, is one of the best in terms of, when you compare it to geothermal, wind, etc., clearly it seems to be the one which is performing best. Do you feel this has been reflected on the ground from your experience in South Africa?
I don't think it was well reflected on the ground, because a lot of people for many years did not know what are the benefits of having a nuclear power station or a nuclear program. I mean, moving from power station to science and technology application, including health and so forth. So that is why for the past couple of years, the message has been changing. And when you go to South Africa today, as compared to 2006, you would find out that there's a lot of people now who are starting to come, understand and support nuclear. I mean, even here, the discussion on national TV and radio station and the public in general, we're starting to see a lot of support, because now the packaging of the message has changed. To say now, start focusing on the benefits, start ensuring that the public do understand the benefit of nuclear. And don't forget also to tell about the risk and the safety aspect of it, because if you don't, you must be factual so that the public can understand. And then you must also ensure that you are sensible in terms of the discussion. So we understand the risks that nuclear poses, but if nuclear is done safely and so forth, for the past couple of 30 years or so, look at the number of fatalities. There's been less fatalities from the nuclear industry. That clearly tells you that those who are running the industry, they are running it with a lot of quality, a lot of safety aspect, and all those things. So that packaging of messages, that's what I'm saying, that when you engage the stakeholder, engage them in a level that when you leave, they can better understand that thing and explain it to their neighbor. So packaging of the message must be very clear. If someone who explains cannot understand you, then it means what you are saying is very wrong. So let us start to package the message correctly, talk to the public about the risk, the safety, the regulatory issues and so forth. And I think also the nuclear industry as a whole, we need to start also saying that how do we standardize the regulatory aspect of it, because I think the cost issue is also reflected there. Thank you.
And getting to the tail end of our conversation, because I do understand we're out of time. The issue of reliability, definitely, engineer began by speaking about, we had a past where we had power rationing as the norm. We seem to have been getting ourselves out of that. How will the nuclear power, how does it look to impact this particular aspect, not just in Kenya, but in many other African countries which are looking at this subject? If I could start with you, Professor Shaukat. The reliability of power supply, it's normally a key issue when we're looking at developing economies. How would nuclear impact in terms of reliable power supply?
I think what we're saying is the country that has decided to embark on nuclear, there should have been a plan before why you would like to go to nuclear. It's not just you want to jump in. The reliability is there because you will have explored all the options. And I'm sure a country like Kenya or countries in Africa would have looked at all options with the plans that they have. We've heard about the Vision 2030. We've heard about how the country would like to industrialize, to have a double-digit economy. Other countries will have done the assessment to look at the sources of energy that they have. And that's for the reasons, what is available in the country. They felt probably they need to bring in nuclear in their energy mix so that it can complement other sources of energy. There are countries that feel, other than the global, climate change, there are countries that feel probably fossil fuels are not going to continue in the long run. So that reliability of nuclear, it all depends on the plans a country has, and also sort of the ventures that they would like to go into.
Yes. Engineer Collins, you began by speaking about, the history that we had in terms of power rationing, and how, would be curious to know how nuclear would impact just reliability of power supply. We know there's a distribution aspect which might not be falling under your mandate in this particular case, but just give us a scenario perhaps of how this would look like.
Yeah, you talked about reliability. We are talking of a plant here that runs for 18 months, and then goes for a fueling cycle of maybe a month or so, and then runs for another 18 months. This is the kind of reliability that we are talking about. We've had challenges in the past because we didn't have enough installed capacity. And even the installed capacity that we had, we've had hydros and thermals, they have to go maintenance maybe after a few months, then the plant is out, then you don't have a plan to replace it, then you do rationing. So we are trying to put up a scenario where you have a plan that can run for 15 months, if you have enough of them. I don't know whether theirs is enough. And then you get that kind of reliability that you are talking about. You have, you know, there are some countries that we never heard of this power blackout. So when you talk about power blackout, they ask you what you are talking about. We want to reach that scenario.
I see.
Yeah.
GPO, I know South Africa has had a bit of challenges in terms of power supply and issues around ESCOM, but just tell us, I mean, how, when nuclear came on board, how it impacted reliability on your side?
I'll give you an example. In 2006 or 7, around about time, there was an incident in Quebec, which sort of the plant was to shut down for a couple of months. The minister by then was Minister Alec Ewen. The Western Cape Chamber of Business was calling the minister every 10 minutes because they were losing money. When Quebec was off, the Western Cape economy was suffering. Just to show you how the reliability aspect of nuclear power station is. Now, you introduce me to electricity, and then tomorrow you take it off. Just find out how it's so painful. I always make that discussion. In about a few months ago, we had load shedding due to coal power station not performing well and other things. And we looked at all the energy sources, how are they performing? Quebec was the best. It was always there, making sure that power is supplied to the grid system. And when you look at the 200 billion investment on IPPs, I mean, now they're roughly about 4,000 megawatt. Sometimes they will not even give you 500 megawatt. Just during those load shedding, and South African economy was bleeding. And then we said we must start to think of how are we investing so that we must make sure that the security and the reliability of supply is guaranteed. Because if you don't do that, it doesn't only affect me at the village or whatsoever with light and cooking. It affects the economy. Because now, no mine worker will go down the shaft. I mean, we've got the deepest mine, 3,000 kilometers based on the wind. Never. We always want to say that they want to make sure that they will go down and they will come out safe. So those are the things that when you converse, you must converse to say reliability and security of supply must always be guaranteed.
Yes. And Professor Kumno, to get to you finally on the subject of nuclear energy and the reliability of power supply. How is this in your case?
Well, public acceptance requires people's understanding of the not only technology but also other social and economic arrangement. And this morning we discussed many in the case of Africa, but this is a global game. As you know, insurance system is not just one company or one nation, but we make it global commitment, global system working together. And there are a number of ways of innovating to take care of liability issues. So I guess we don't have enough time here, but there are a number of new ideas coming in, and I want to assure ordinary people our liability scheme is even much better than taking accident insurance of ordinary car. So we can make it like that, and we do have system. So I hope this message will go out to ordinary people in simple wording, and we have to really show the real game rules, and that will improve our future. Okay. That's what I like to say. I don't know whether we are going to discuss more, but if you allow me, I came here from Washington.
Yes.
And it's a long distance away, but this is to say thank you to those people who helped us to make advancement. And then to our younger people, we do have the vision for the future, and let's work together. So I really came here for the solidarity.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm told the Principal Secretary has arrived, and therefore we should be really winding up our conversation. Just to get some of your closing thoughts around Kenya playing in the global nuclear space and what this portends for the economy, if I could start with you, Shavkat, please.
I think for me, really, let me start with the visionary leadership. And I would like to pick from where Professor Chong just left it. That early 60s we were at par with countries like South Korea, and he said that we were even assisted and helped them. I think with good governance, leadership, visionary leadership, commitment, we can be able to do virtually anything that we would like to do. The area of nuclear science, it requires that commitment. We need to use it. We need to put safety, security, safeguards in place. And above all, we must be able to have a very strong legal and regulatory infrastructure. And lastly, I think it's all about human resource as well. We must be able to train and be able to have critical mass to be able to drive this agenda, because it's a long-term commitment. And I think with proper plans, phases approach, it can be done and it should be done. Thank you.
I see. Engineer Collins?
Yes, I think I want to say that any country that needs to progress should not fear technology. I mean, technology is developing every second. And maybe we need to ask ourselves as a country that this technology that is all in the entire West and is now under a lot of construction in the East, everyone is going for it. Maybe we should ask ourselves what is in it. And if you talk of US, Germany, even though they are trying to scale down their nuclear, you talk of France, then you talk of Korea, you talk of China, talk of India, talk of Pakistan, maybe come to Africa and talk of our own first world here, South Africa. What is in this technology? Maybe that's what we need to think about.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you did mention, before I let you go, you did mention the fact that we have the bill in Parliament. Is there anything else you would think, perhaps from a policy standpoint, that would help fast-track our uptake of nuclear energy?
The bill has gone through the first and the second reading, so it's just a matter of the final reading, and then we should be able to have the regulator in place.
I see. Yeah. Okay. GPO?
I think one of the best things that we need to do is that the industry need to start changing how they communicate. You know, I was one example. You know, they will ask you, how much does this cost? And people will say, no, we can't say it. We need to start communicating. If it costs 11 billion USD, say it. And how it's going to be funded, and how the repayment will be done. Let's start to communicate, proper message, talk to people, and make sure that our stakeholder engagement processes is efficient, is effective. So, and then the other thing is that we need to start introducing nuclear from as soon as lower primary schools. No, like science and technology applications in agriculture, in health and so forth. Because it's much easier to introduce them so that by the time they go to tertiary, they already understand. Because a lot of times, people only know in nuclear once they get employment and so forth. So those are the issues that needs to be done. And the other last part of it is that let us try to bring young professionals together in each and every country within the continent so that they can start speaking on the behalf of the industry also. Because if young people see the benefits, they will be much easier to take to the public and say, this is how the nuclear industry is beneficiating us, and you'll get the support that you need. So if those things can be achieved, I think we can go far.
All right. Professor, your closing remarks.
Yes. Just last month in Washington, our design, APR 1400, received safety design certificate from U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And on time, without any delay, in 42 months we did it. And we showed it can be done. It's a third generation nuclear power reactor. Actually, a couple of them are being in operation. Now, I hope we gathered here, not just not only just reviewing issues of concern, but also we have to give hope to the younger generation. So, you see, we are in the age of artificial intelligence, and we know how to handle big data, and this is a new era of technological development. And we should overcome those old problems of 20th century, because we are in the 21st century, and new possibilities, we can see that. So nuclear power will solve the issue of environment. And the issue of environment is challenging the mankind now, and we know how to do it. So I hope this meeting will ignite the torch of hope for the future. And we will do it with all this excitement and commitment.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That has been our conversation. We've had a panel of Professor Abdul Razak Shawkat, Director Africa at the International Atomic Energy Agency, Sanswa Abel Gaupalel, GPO, President of Africa Young Nuclear Generation, Engineer Collins Juma, who is the Chief Executive for the Nuclear Power Agency, as well as the President for the Institute of Engineers in Kenya, and Professor Kumno Chong, Professor of the Korea Institute of Advanced Nuclear Science. And that has been our discussion, shaping matters around public buy-in, what should be done in terms of packaging the conversation, and where the policy conversation is all about. We understand there's a bill in Parliament which has gone through the first and second reading, and therefore a regulator should be in place. And I'd like to release my panel to get back to their seats. Thank you very much for your time. Shortly, we shall be having the Principal Secretary, I should say, for the Ministry of Energy, who has arrived, and he will be able to get on stage and to give us a few remarks. Gentlemen, you're free to take your seats. So thank you very much. Appreciated your time. Please, you may. Yeah. It's been a great conversation this morning, focusing on matters of nuclear energy and the Kenyan landscape and how this is playing out. Thank you. Please. Thank you. Thank you. And we would like to take this opportunity to invite Bassett. Bassett Buyuka. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Let's give a hand to Julian's and his distinguished panel. We move very swiftly to the official opening ceremonies, and acknowledging again the arrival of our chief guest, the Principal Secretary, Ministry of Energy, Dr. Engineer Joseph Njoroge. Karibu. And at this juncture, I will invite again, I hope he has gotten some breath now. I'll invite the Chief Executive Officer of the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency, Engineer Collins Juma, to come and give his opening remarks, or the speech he had for the opening ceremony, after which he'll invite the Chairman of the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency, who will in turn invite the Principal Secretary. So, Engineer Juma, and as he comes, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. I think I've been in this podium now enough times. I don't want to take much more time. Our chief guest is here, and I'm not sure I know his program. Maybe he has constraint of time. I want to take this opportunity to thank our chief guest now for taking opportunity to come and be with us in this, the very, very first Africa Nuclear Business Forum. I want to thank my colleagues in the sector who are here, and I want to thank also the members of other institutions that are represented here. Without taking much time, I just want to take this opportunity to invite the Chairman of Nuclear Power and Energy Agency to give his opening remarks, and After that, I can invite the chief guest to give his keynote speech. Thank you. Bwana Chairman, please welcome to the podium.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, good morning. I'm pleased to welcome all of you to this first ever Africa Nuclear Business Platform. As the chairperson of the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency, it gives me a great pleasure to see all the delegates from various parts of the world. This is a clear demonstration of the confidence that embarking countries can successfully launch a nuclear power program. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sustainable Development Goals is the universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. Goal number 7 is about ensuring access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy for all. Kenya has considered nuclear energy as a potential priority in the long-term electricity generation to be included in the energy mix, taking into account that nuclear power is low-carbon energy source that contributes to the mitigation of the impact of climate change and the achievement of SDGs. To this end, Kenya is following the International Atomic Energy Agency milestone approach, which is a phased approach for newcomer countries introducing nuclear power program. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya strongly believes that launching a nuclear power program comes with a unique responsibility to enhance the relevant nuclear-related infrastructure, including and not limited to strengthening regulatory capabilities, human resource development, safety culture, and national industrial involvement. Kenya has made significant steps in this front and is currently pursuing the selection of the nuclear power plant site, building the necessary human resources, and also establishing an independent nuclear regulatory body. Ladies and gentlemen, as we commence this forum, let it be the goal and aspiration of the leading and developed countries in peaceful application of nuclear technology to hold the hands of the embarking countries so that we can, with ease, successfully and safely introduce the nuclear power programs. Now, last week we had a conference in Pretoria, South Africa, organized by the African Young Generation in Nuclear. And as we were discussing whether Africa is ready for nuclear, we came to a conclusion which I would like to share with you. And it goes like this, that if a country can plan, build, and operate a nuclear research reactor, and can plan, build, and operate nuclear power plants, then there's nothing else they can't do. That means nuclear power program builds a firm foundation for industrialization because of the very many technologies that must be mastered, whether it's nuclear science, specialized construction techniques, computer control systems, application of nuclear radiation technologies. All these put together ensures that a country is ready for industrialization. And the conclusion was that Africa should accelerate their nuclear power programs if they hope and wish to join the industrial world. Now, let us network during these 2 days and learn from each other. I also believe the long-term collaboration and partnership will be founded during this forum. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I look forward for the great deliberations and the concrete recommendations to the embarking countries on the nuclear power program. And it is now my pleasure to invite the chief guest, Dr. Engineer Joseph Njoroge, PS, Ministry of Energy, Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. In Kenya, we normally say karibuni sana. Welcome to our country, Kenya. And I want to appreciate and acknowledge the presence of Professor Chum. Because of our historical development of nuclear energy here in Kenya, Professor, who is a distinguished and endowed professor in the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, is one of our founders in terms of offering advisory services in this important subject of nuclear power energy in Kenya. Shaukat is the director of International Atomic Energy and is one of us in our country, and we acknowledge and appreciate. And my brother here, who has just come home from Vienna, who spearheaded our interactions with the IAEA when he was there in Korea. So I want to appreciate and acknowledge all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this very important forum where we want to benchmark and share knowledge on nuclear energy. And I feel very honored to be delivering this statement on behalf of the government of Kenya to welcome you and also give you assurance of our appreciation to your visit to our country. Not only to benchmark and share knowledge on nuclear, but also enjoy our beautiful country, Kenya. Our development agenda is formulated around Vision 2030. In 2008, we launched the vision of our country, the dream of our country, of making Kenya a middle-income, industrializing country that offers high quality of lifestyle to its citizen by the year 2030. So we want first to be a middle-income economy. Two, we want to be an industrializing country. those two dreams of Vision 2030 that creates an enabling environment for a good lifestyle of our citizens cannot be achieved without reliable, sustainable, competitively priced, affordable, and clean energy. And therefore, in the Ministry of Energy, our mission is indeed to focus on delivery of energy with those attributes to the people of Kenya. In our mix of energy sources today, we do have hydro as our ancient predominant source. With the time, we have developed geothermal as the flagship base source of energy. Out of the realization that hydro energy cannot sustain industrialization alone because of the impact of weather to hydro energy. We put up a lot of efforts in the last 15 years or so to fast-track development of geothermal energy. And at the moment, as we speak, geothermal energy contributes about half of our energy mix. Hydro, about 30%. And then we have solar and wind contributing about 10, on the average, 10, 12%. And the balance, which is just about 10, or even less than 10 in most cases, is contributed by thermal, fossil-fueled thermal plants. And therefore, we are one of the very few countries globally whose energy sources is over and above 90% from green sources. And therefore, we have desire to continue contributing to what we call a green world, a world without emissions, and a world that sustains life for its citizens. And I did listen to the speeches of the last panel and the emphasis of nuclear being a clean source of energy that has very insignificant emissions. There's a way of making sure that globally we reduce emissions and therefore make a sustainable world, make a world that will be able to sustain lives because of its green form. And therefore, our appetite for initiating development of nuclear energy is driven fundamentally by the fact that by the time we will have exploited all the geothermal that we have almost exploited our hydro potential. We have a lot of solar and wind, but those are not base sources. They are intermittent sources, and therefore they cannot be fully relied on for industrialization. They are a very good complement, but not a sole source of energy for industrialization. And therefore, at one time, when we will have exploited all the geothermal, which obviously has got some limits, we will require to use another base source of energy. And our choice of that base will have to be clean energy, and that will be nuclear. And that answers the frequently asked question about why is Kenya developing nuclear energy, or even desiring to develop nuclear energy, and in some countries they are decommissioning nuclear power plants. We have very good reasons for that appetite of preparing ourselves. And I always keep telling our stakeholders that when we talk about nuclear energy, it is a journey with a lot of processes that requires to be complied with. It has a lot of statutory requirements. And therefore, we must take time to prepare ourselves to develop nuclear power plants. We must build capacity. We must do the necessary environmental impact assessments and compliance. And that explains why we have been on this journey. We started the nuclear energy as a project in the last 6 years or so. We've now evolved and matured to be a nuclear power energy agency. And very soon, maybe 10 years, maybe 12 years, maybe 15 years, we'll be now talking about putting up a nuclear power plant, after we have carefully navigated the route for nuclear energy development. After we have benchmarked, after we have learned from our forerunners and ensured that we are ready to develop nuclear energy. Ladies and gentlemen, energy is an enabler. When we talked about Vision 2030, and we have already had several medium-term plans. We started in 2008, the first 5 years, up to 2012. We had the first medium-term plan, and we had projects, especially infrastructure projects, to start off the journey of industrialization and being a middle-income economy. Second medium-term plan, 2013 to 2018. And now we are on the third medium-term plan, 2018 to 2022. And in this medium-term plan, in our earnest endeavor to create a country which is middle income, which conforms to a GDP of middle income countries. And for those, the economists know that there is a correlation between GDP and what we call per capita consumption of energy. The developed countries have very high per capita consumption of energy. And therefore, if we really want to become a middle-income economy, we must be producing and consuming energy of reasonable proportions as our per capita consumption. If we want to industrialize, energy is the enabler. in this mid-term, in this third term of our journey to Vision 2030, we have chosen to focus on 4 agendas. We call them the Big Four. The first one is manufacturing, to create jobs for our youth and for the purposes of creating an industrializing nation. We have affordable housing to make sure that we have a good lifestyle of our people. Remember, in the Vision 2030, when I stated, I did say industrializing, middle income, that offers a good lifestyle for our people. So affordable housing is a good lifestyle for our people. Food and nutrition security. Again, food is a basic need. Without food, you cannot talk about other needs. It's at the bottom of the basic. It's life. Then we have universal health care. Again, you can't talk of a good lifestyle without health care. So our 4 agenda items are very critical in achieving or in getting to the achievement of Vision 2030. And all of them will not be without energy with the attributes I stated. You cannot talk about manufacturing without reliable, affordable, competitively priced energy. In the area of affordable housing, you can put up very good houses, but you need the services. And those services cannot be without energy. In the universal health care, the equipment for the universal health care heavily relies on reliable energy. And therefore, without reliable energy, you cannot achieve universal health care. Food and nutrition. We have a beautiful country, very expansive country, very good soils. But we rely always on what we call lane-fed agriculture. And the lane-fed agriculture has not been able to create food security, wonder of the world. Wildlife migration in Masai Mara is just a few kilometers from the Rift Valley, off the Rift Valley. Actually, it is a neighbor to the Rift Valley. And if you want, you can go and enjoy mountain climbing in Aberdares and Mount Kenya, which again is further west as you go on with the Rift Valley. Very scenic. So please make sure that you enjoy yourselves and take liberty to serve our country and to enjoy the hospitality of Kenyans. With those few remarks, ladies and gentlemen, I now want to declare this conference officially open and wish you very, very gainful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's appreciate the Principal Secretary once more. And Bona PS, just to let you know, it's very good you talked up the geothermal, because on Thursday, the delegates will be visiting Olkaria, and they'll be able to witness firsthand what you've just been describing very vividly here. It's been quite a morning. I know you've had a lot of deliberations. We want